And now on 2GB Sydney, 4BC Brisbane and network stations across Australia, it's time for Nights with John Stanley.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. 7 minutes past 8 is the time. It is a Wednesday night and we have a lot to do tonight, but also a lot on the plate of the government. Now, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he's flown out again today. He's on his way. He's going to San Francisco. There's this APEC meeting. It's very, very difficult when you look at the significance of the APEC meeting to say he shouldn't go. But in the Parliament today, the question of these detainees that have been released, the government's scrambling now to put some legislation through based on the High Court decision that will allow them to get these people, some of the worst of them, we're talking murderers, we're talking pedophiles, back into some form of detention. And they're saying that legislation could come as early as tomorrow, or at the very latest at some stage next week. So we're talking about within days this legislation as the government now scrambles to put the legislation together. And then there's also the question of the rise of anti-Semitism across the country, which is of great concern. Now, in the Parliament today, a couple of really significant contributions as they squared off. Peter Dutton teeing off on Anthony Albanese, and Anthony Albanese replying. Now, I can't play you the whole speeches, but I'll play you bits of both. This is, first of all, the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, early today in the Parliament.
Mr Speaker, the reality is that this Prime Minister has been missing in action. Missing in action when the Australian people need him most. The Australian Prime Minister has one of the most serious charges in this country. That is to take care of the Australian people, to protect, to defend them, to make sure that where threats exist, the Prime Minister utilises the powers at his disposal to deal with that threat, to neutralise it and to keep our country and our people safe. And he fails at the first hurdle. He fails at the first hurdle. The dreadful attacks that we saw on October 7 in Israel resulted in a listed terrorist organisation here in our country and in other countries in the West and other parts of the developed world, saw Hamas go in and massacre people of Jewish faith. It was a disgraceful act and rightly condemned by both sides of politics. It has given rise to a discussion here in this country, in the United States, elsewhere in the world, and it has seen a significant rise in anti-Semitic behaviour. And I commend those members, one of them that I can identify on the opposite side, for having the guts to stand up and to speak strongly in favour of the Jewish community against those who perform provocative acts, calling Jews names that shouldn't be repeated anywhere, but F the Jews and gas the Jews. And this Prime Minister had a solemn duty, Mr Speaker, to stand up and to make sure that his government spoke with one voice. But did they do that? No. And what the Australian public has seen and what has shocked the Jewish community in recent weeks since the 7th of October is that this government is speaking out of both sides of its mouth. Let's call it out for what it is.
Yeah, so that was Peter Dutton in the Parliament, and that was a pretty fierce address by him, and it got this response from the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese before he headed off to APEC. Have a listen.
Well, when people look for a definition of overreach, they will search for this motion. That's moved by the Leader of the Opposition. There is no issue too big for him to show how small he is.
We'll cease rejecting.
And the weaponisation or attempt to weaponise anti-Semitism in this chamber and make it a partisan issue is frankly beyond contempt. Frankly beyond contempt. I spoke in this chamber on Monday about the events in Caulfield and about the events in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. There was no qualification whatsoever in my condemnation. This is the same political party
the member for Fairfax
that tried to repeal Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act.
Yeah, look, that goes into the issue where the 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, which was being supported, and they were trying to do it in the face of opposition from the Jewish community. And so essentially that's the tenor of the speech. He also detailed how he's been a long-term supporter of a two-state solution, which I think any sane person would be. 131873 is the number. That was the tenor of the news of the day, but there are some issues, I think. The issue of homelessness is one that just gets overlooked, so I want to talk about that and a few others as well at 17 minutes past 8 or 7 if you're listening to us in Queensland. Our Queensland network stations join us at the top of the next hour. It is a Wednesday night.